And there you go. So you should get a little message. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Luke, or George.
Oh no, I was just saying maybe we can wait till 3 past or something. There is always someone who's late, but
Actually have our two beginning course teachers. Reverend Maruta uh, is on screen. Uh, he taught this week the class on Buddhism and free religion. And the Reverend Andrew James Brown. Uh, and uh, he and I have been in cahoots, uh, deepening our friendship in the last 2 years. He's an Oxford trained minister in Cambridge Unitarian Church. Uh, and he is achieving something that uh, is modeled on Shinichiro Imaoka's uh, free religious uh, fellowship in Tokyo. He is bringing his congregation into a free religious fellowship in the UK. Uh, he has begun uh, a 2-year project that he completed, the 106 essays on that Imaoka Sensei wrote in Japanese, very, very classical uh, kanji. That is, the characters that were so difficult, I could not get a Japanese translator to work on all 106. And so uh, Andrew has achieved that, and it's only to be polished before it will be published. So I'm going to turn this over to him without any. Oh, I've got to mention that he's a jazz musician, among other things, many, many talents. And so it's been a delight these 2 years to get to know him and pester him. Go ahead, please, Andrew.
Thank you. I think that was pester him, but he's also pastored me as well. He's been a very, very good pastor and a very careful friend. So thank you, George. Uh, and welcome to you all. It's lovely to see a few faces I recognise over the years, but also a good friend of mine, Vince, coming in from the Philippines, who's been engaging with me at and the local congregation in Cambridge as well. So we have an interesting relationship of free religionist jiyu shukyo in dialogue with someone from the Philippines in the community. So lovely to see you, Vince. Thanks for coming. So particular thanks to George because without his initial work on Imaoka Sensei, it would just have been impossible to do any of the things that I've been able. So a real enabler there. And thank you, of course, to the IARF for hosting these two sessions under their names. And Luke, thanks for being here and keeping an eye on the meeting as we go ahead. I'm very grateful to you all. Thank you. Also to note, right at the beginning, that whatever else free religion is, I'm going to come back to that term, it is always a collaborative project. So I want to make it clear that I am encouraging all of you to feel comfortable in contributing to our conversation today. Any questions, thoughts, and insights you may have. It is a collaborative project. It makes no sense other than that. And for those present who are Japanese speakers, I think, thank you, Michinori, and you, sorry, I'll get your name right. You've very kindly given me your nickname, Yuji. Thank you, Yuji. Both Japanese speakers. If you find anything in the text that you want to challenge and change and nuance, please do so. You are the people who will know about those nuances. And if at any time you feel you may be able to help with the project of nuancing the translation, please be in touch. You will be the ones that will know, not me. So your expertise and insights are hugely welcomed. So shall I do a spotlight for all? There we go. Let me get a spotlight. So it helps me do the screen sharing. So today what I'm going to do is introduce you to Imaoka Shinichiro's basic understanding of something he called jiyu shukyo. I'll put it up on the screen in a second. I think it should be spelt with a hyphen, jiyu shukyo with a hyphen. And it generally has been translated as free religion, but I think it's better translated much more discursively as a creative, inquiring, free and liberative religion or spirituality. Let me just put up on the screen the calendar so you can, sorry, the dictionary. Here we go. Just so you can see the Japanese term. Those of you, so it's jiyu, these first two characters here, jiyu, and then the second two characters are this shukyo. The second word means religion or denomination, and teaching or doctrine. I just want to say one quick word, again, particularly for those familiar with Japanese Buddhist traditions. Imaoka Sensei came from a Jodo Shinshu family background, Nishihonganji, and so he was really aware of the distinction between self-power and other power, jiriki and tariki. And through his whole life, he wanted to make sure that it wasn't simply a self-power practice, ji, but it was also tarik, it was another power practice. So when you hear the jiriki, because Imaoka Sensei thinks the self is found in the other, and then the self and other are found in these big cooperative communities stretching out to nature, in my opinion, his whole life is trying to balance self-power with other power. So when we hear this word jiyu shukyo, please remember that understanding of self. So, when you combine the term, jiyu shukyo translates to either free religion or religious freedom. And this ambiguity will later become important to Imaoka Sensei, but we'll get to that in a bit. It's also vital at the beginning to state that in Imaoka Sensei's usage, the word free, jiyu, does not in any sense refer to something which is arguing against all moral, religious or social norms. In fact, far from it. This is because for Imaoka Sensei, free religion, jiyu shukyo, is all about helping people from different spiritual and religious backgrounds to develop together better, more inclusive, liberative, moral or religious or social norms that can be shared over the different religions of the world and different cultures. So I think it's important to remember that the free religion he's talking about can be seen as part of this wider project that's sometimes been called a global ethic. I think that's an important thing to say at the beginning. So I'm going to spend the latter part of my short talk, it's about half an hour long, introducing you to and talking with you about Imaoka Sensei's continuously developing principles of living, which tell us a great deal about his conception of free religion, jiyu shukyo. But before we do that, I'm going to begin by giving you a brief overview of Imaoka Shinichiro's extraordinary 106-year-long life. Take about half an hour. And then the remaining hour and a half, we've the whole meeting is scheduled to be 2 hours long. So the remaining hour and a half will be dedicated to exploring together, I hope, with you, some of the possibilities free religion or jiyu shukyu might offer those of us connected to the IARF in some fashion. So to get going, I'm going to share with you some pictures so you have his face in mind. This is Imaoka Shin'ichiro, Imaoka Sensei in his 30s, so still a relatively young man at this point. Then we have him in 1965. He's just received an imperial award at this point. He's standing in front of his wife's company. She was an extraordinary person in her own right, and I think, maybe something about her could be drawn out at some point. But there's Imaoka, and he's in his getting an older man now. And then this is a picture, I believe, taken by
Andrew, we don't see anything, I think.
Oh,
Is
yes,
it possible?
there is only a message that you are sharing your screen, but there is no
Ah,
image.
okay. Well, that's a disappointment, isn't it?
Maybe you have to restart it simply, I suppose.
Okay. Let me quickly try that. Thank you. Yeah, jump in if there's any of those things. Can you see that?
Yeah, yes.
Yes,
Hey.
thank you.
Right, that's good. So go back. That's Imaoka in his 30s, Imaoka Sensei, young man still then. Here is him in front of his wife's company in 1965, now getting to be an older man, a much older man. And then back where we were, this is a photograph taken, I think, by George in the 1980s. This is at his desk when he was 104 years old. So there we are. So you've got a picture of him in your head. So he was born on September 16th, 1881, into a traditional Pure Land Jodo Shinshu Buddhist farming family. And in his teenage years, he converted to an Anglican form of Christianity. This was an act that very nearly completely estranged him from his family. It was quite a risky thing to do at that period in Japanese history. However, eventually he found Anglican Christianity too narrow, and he began to become involved with the more liberal Congregational Church. And in 1906, he was called to become the pastor of the Congregational Church in Kobe. But a spiritual crisis occurred when he realized he simply couldn't convert others from their faith to Christianity. And eventually his own theology was found heterodox by an ordination committee, and so he resigned and went back to Tokyo in 1910. It was there he met the important non-sectarian religious thinker, practitioner, and founder of the Itoen community, Tenko Nishida, Tenko-san. Some of you may know Itoen is, of course, now a member of the IARF. Through Tenko-san, he met Okada Torajiro, who taught a simple form of quiet sitting meditation called Seiza. And this became Imaoka Sensei's central lifelong practice, and also that of many associated with the Japanese Unitarian movement. If you're ever interested in knowing how that's done, please be in touch. I have a friend of mine, Miki Nakura Sensei, a Japanese Jodo Shinshu priest in New York who teaches it and has online classes. Vince and I regularly attend that. Eventually, the most progressive wing of the Japanese Congregational ministers began gathering in Tokyo. Imaoka Sensei joined them, and it was they who formed the heart of what became the Japanese Unitarian mission, both at the nation's most influential religious and cultural journal, Cosmos, and also at Unity Hall, the headquarters of the Japanese Unitarian Association, which he formally joined in 1916 and eventually became its last secretary. So again, to give you a picture of this. Hopefully you can see this. Here's the building in Tokyo, the Uitzukwan, so the Unity Hall. That's in March 25th, 1894. This survived. The building was lost to the Unitarians in the 1920s. It survived the Great Kanto earthquake, amazingly, but alas was destroyed during some of the bombing during the Pacific War, so it doesn't exist anymore. But you can see it's a very fine building. Let me make this larger for you. The building at the top was an earlier building, the first home of the School for Advanced Studies, which was connected to the Unitarians. For those of you, again, who are Japanese readers, there's the kanji there. You can just see Yu-itsu. Remember, it's going from right to left, just on the... So that's the old building. Now we're inside the building you saw at the beginning. This is the entrance hall. Offices to the left and right, and various studies. If you go up the stairs there, to the left up above, that's the main meeting hall. You'll see that in a moment. Here's one of the lecture halls, lecture rooms on the ground floor. This is the library and reading room. Again, I think this was on the ground floor. I do have a plan of the whole building somewhere. And lastly, here's the main meeting hall itself. This is upstairs. And using a very old, very different version of Yuitsu Kan, that's a handwritten piece of calligraphy. Maybe we can come back to these. I think it's truth, righteousness, and peace. These are old kanji. Perhaps one day I can have a word with a few of you about that. But that's the main lecture hall. Unity Hall. So between 1904 and 1906, he studied at the Tokyo Imperial University, where he was taught by the important professor of comparative religions, Anasaki Masaharu. And it was with Anasaki Sensei that he went to Harvard University between 1915 and 1916, both as his assistant and also to study at the Divinity School himself. During this same period, he translated into Japanese R.J. Campbell's New Theology and Rudolf Eucken's Ethics and Modern Thought, two important liberal Christian books of the time. But with the collapse and dispersal of the Japanese Unitarian movement in 1922, a situation caused, alas, primarily by the American Unitarian Association's astonishingly negative and ultimately highly damaging attitude towards the Japanese Unitarian mission. George may be able to speak to that at some point. Imaoka Sensei was forced to abandon any idea of pursuing a formal religious ministry, and so began his journey towards a life as an educator. Imaoka Sensei lectured from 1919 to 1936 at Nihon University on the history of religions and the outline of Christianity. And during that time, in 1925, he accepted the principalship of Saisuku High School. And within 15 years, Imaoka Sensei had helped turn it into a symbol of academic excellence in private education for all of Japan. It's a remarkable school, still exists. So that became central to his life. Between 1932 and 1940, he worked with the American journalist and author J.W.T. Mason, studying Shinto. And he translated into Japanese two of Mason's books on Shinto, which are still in print today. My friend Miki Nakura-san, he was back in Tokyo just a few weeks ago and picked up a modern edition of Imaoka Sensei's translation. So it's still in print, it's still being published, and apparently very highly thought of. Both Imaoka Sensei and Mason were extremely knowledgeable about Henri Bergson's philosophy, and their interpretation of the meaning of Shinto owed much to the kind of thinking found in Bergson's creative evolution. It's a really interesting cultural interchange there to study at some point. But so much so that Imaoka Sensei said that Mason claimed, George and I think that maybe this was as much Imaoka's idea as Mason's, but that Bergson's élan vital was a French version of the Shinto spirit. As a committed liberal free religious person, it is, of course, only natural that the run-up to and the period of the Pacific War between 1941 and 1945 was an extremely difficult time for him and liberal religion and education in Japan. This was because the extreme right-wing ethno-religious nationalism of the then current Japanese regime had little time for such a liberal, eclectic and cosmopolitan approach to the world. But despite these dark years, in 1948, 3 years after the end of the war, he was able to found the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai. Let me just share again for Japanese readers, but it's important. It's the bottom one that's most. This is what was on his notice board. This is in the middle. This kyokai is the one that's most often used. You probably most recognize this. This gets translated as church. Most generally, although I do know of a couple of Jodo Shinshu temples in Kyoto that use that kyokai, but he used this older character for kai to translate the word church to try and give the idea of that it was larger and more inclusive than simply a Christian church. Just in passing, his very first, I'm going to mention it, the Association Concordia, which was an early iteration of liberal religion in Japan, used this version of Kietsu Kyokai. This Kyokai, again, Japanese readers and speakers will know, turns up in all kinds of places, like NHK, the Japanese broadcaster. This is that Kyokai. So in his published books, it tends to get published like this, and on his notice board, he uses these characters. Kietsu means returning to one. So it's like the returning to one church or fellowship or something like that. So, there's an interesting story to be told about that usage as well. So, as I said, Kietsu Kyokai means or has often been translated as the Unitarian Church. But I think the Unity Fellowship or returning to one fellowship is perhaps more accurate. So that was in 1948. He founds that. In the same year, with excuse me, with Shigetaro Akashi and Hideo Kishimoto, he founded the Japan Free Religion Association and also joined the International Association for Religious Freedom, the IARF, which was then still called the International Association for Liberal Christianity and Religious Freedom. In 1949, under his principalship, the Board of Trustees of the Saisuko Academy resolved to, quote, base all educational activities at the Academy on free religion, jiyu shukyo. as I've already mentioned, although it was related to an earlier interfaith study group, also called Kiitsu Kyokai, that was the first one of those names that I showed you, that they translated into English as the Association Concordia. So although his Kiitsu Kyokai of 1948 is related to that and the pre-war Unitarian movement, the Tokyo Unitarian Church, or the Tokyo Unity Fellowship, was nothing less than a gathering for the practice and study of free religion, jiyu shukyo. And within it, Imaoka Sensei constantly taught that free religion was something much more than a particular religion. So again, I have a little picture to share. Let's go back. There you are. There's the notice board. This is the notice board outside Sosuko Academy. You can see at the top the Japan Free Religious Association. That's what that says. And then here you can see Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai. There's that old kanji character at the end. And you can see that in English, the decision was taken to translate it as Tokyo Unitarian Church. For Imaoka Sensei and the Tokyo Kiitsu Kyokai, free religion, jiyu shukyo, was not limited to organized religion, and it was a way of being in the world which helped those who were members of the previous Japanese Unitarian Association to go beyond historic Unitarianism, particularly in its European forms, and indeed beyond any ism. And as he made it clear to an IARF meeting in 1984, I think Yuji was there, so you may have read and heard this before. This is a quote, "Free religion is not a new religion which conflicts with Christianity, Buddhism, or any of the other established religions. It maintains that no established religion has a monopoly on truth, and that any established religion can become free religion if it is humble and anxious to learn truths which are proclaimed by others. The essence of free religion is the unification," there's your Kiitsu again, "the unification of pure religion and complete freedom. Or to put it another way, free religion does not lie in doctrines or in rituals, but in the manifestation of creative and universal human nature. Accordingly, free religion extends to other worldly affairs such as politics, economy and science, etc., if they are manifestations of genuine human nature." He then concludes by saying, in other words, they are unorganized religions, unquote. But please note that he says unorganized, not disorganized. Having sat with his writings for a long time now, I take it that he's basically resisting the idea that free religion could or ever should be organized along traditional denominational lines, and that therefore, any networking together of free religious individuals, jiyu shukyojin, and free religious communities, kyokai, needs to be of a different, looser and liberative kind that he hoped could be found in some kind of international association of free religions. So I think a really important point. And indeed, until his dying day, Imaoka Sensei continued to hope that the International Association for Religious Freedom would change its English name to the International Association of Free Religions. So from the IARF to the IAFR. Hasn't happened. But as you heard at the beginning of this talk, this very important change of emphasis that he was always encouraging always already was implicit in the Japanese translation of the International Association for Religious Freedom. apologies for my poor pronunciation, but Kokusai Jiyu Shukyo Renmai, because Jiyu Shukyo can be translated as either free religion or religious freedom, if you're going back into the Japanese. So Imaoka Sensei was always encouraging free religion, even as it also had this additional meaning of religious freedom. In connection with this point, it's very important to know that Imaoka Sensei was a key figure in finally getting the IARF to alter its name at the 1969 Boston Conference from the International Association for Liberal Christianity and Religious Freedom to the more inclusive International Association for Religious Freedom, thereby enabling two Japanese Shinto and Buddhist groups to join, namely the Konkokyo Church of Izuo and Rishikosekai. And in the following year, 1970, the Tsubaki Grand Shrine was also enrolled as a member of the IARF. Imaoka Sensei's gentle, quiet, but profoundly radical work was publicly recognized in several ways. In 1950 and 1965, the emperor honored him with awards for his service to education. You saw at the beginning that lovely picture of him with his imperial award. He never boasted about it or talked about it. In fact, many people didn't know he'd won any awards at all until he was getting towards the end of his life. In 1972, Meadville Theological Seminary granted him a Doctor of Divinity degree. In 1979, the World Conference on Religion and Peace recognized his leadership with a Distinguished Founders Award. And in 1981, the IARF at its Congress in Holland presented to his son and daughter-in-law an award for his outstanding contribution to interfaith understanding and cooperation. In 1974 and 1975, the Japanese nation heard at least two of his talks on radio and television. And in 1981, to celebrate his 100th birthday, the Japan Free Religious Association published 109 of more than 150 of his essays, as well as transcriptions of the aforementioned radio and television talks, one of which you have in the session materials already provided. Now I have here, because as George indicated, we just recently finished a first draft translation of the book that we hope will, it's a big thing. And it's a lot of words, all very interesting words. And we have hopes that we will be able to get some, at least some, but perhaps eventually all of them published in English. As I've already mentioned, any Japanese expertise and help is gratefully received. It would be wonderful. Right. Astonishingly, Imaoka Sensei was still actively engaged in ministry and continued regularly to attend and address the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai until 1986, age 104. But finally, in the early part of 1988, he became ill, and on April the 11th, 1988, this apostle of free religion, a kind of bodhisattva, kami, Christian and Unitarian sage, who was sometimes called the Emerson of Japan, died of pneumonia at the age of 106. Now, at this point, I could go straight on to introduce you to the text we've got, but it strikes me to break up me going on. If I unspotlight myself, are there any immediate questions about the history? Any clarifications people want? Please do ask. And if there's nothing, that's fine. I'll just carry on.
Can I ask a question, Andrew?
Yeah, sorry. It's Peter.
Peter, yeah. Well, thank you very much. This was really very, very interesting, I thought. I heard you speak about free religion and about free religions. Is there a difference between those two? Because free religion seems to to refer to one
Yeah.
package of concepts and thoughts. And if you speak about free religions, it sounds like there are several religions that could be labeled free. So
Exactly.
what is exactly the
Yeah.
concept?
That's an absolutely fantastic question. And that is what I will be dealing with in this next thing. You're right to point to that distinction, and I will try and draw that out to your satisfaction. If at the end you're still confused, just come back and say, woo.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
No. That's a great reminder. Thank you. That's helpful. Any other immediate questions? Just any clarificatory ones, because we can go into a proper expansive conversation at the end. No, that looks good. Okay. One quick question. Did you all manage to download the session materials? I'm going to share them on screen, but just to alert you to the fact that the things I'm about to share with you are available as a PDF via the IARF website. So that you don't need them now because I'm going to share them on screen. But for later, you might find them valuable. Okay, back to. So here we are. So I'm going to share with you two. Oh no, sorry, it's done its thing again. I know you can't see that. It's doing one of its funny little glitches. Make sure we can get the screen up. There we go. Have another go. Wonderful. There it is. I have no idea why it's doing these things, but it's best not to worry. I'm going to introduce you to two versions of his principles of living, or sometimes he called them statements of faith. And why I'm picking these two is, I think, fairly straightforward. Every year, round about the new year, so it's rather nice that we're at that time, he would revise his own principles of living. And a lot of those, I imagine, are private. We've got a few of the ones that weren't published as such. He seems to be doing that every year. But the reason I've picked the two we're going to look at now to begin our period of conversation about in what consists free religion. The reason I've chosen this first one from 1973 is because it was a revision of something he wrote back in 1965, you see, as a personal statement of faith. But it became the practice of the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai to recite this on in their Sunday meetings. So this has a public life. It's out in the world, so it seems important to note that, and it's a good text to pick. And then I will also, after that, share with you this statement of faith for my daily life. It also has some written notes. We'll come to that. And this was the last of the ones that made it out into the world. This was actually distributed at the 1984 Congress, the Congress distributed in Tokyo, which had the theme of the religious path to peace, Eastern Initiative and Western Response. And he handed that out to delegates there. So again, this has a public-facing quality about it. And he wrote this in English. So the second one he wrote in English. The first one he wrote in Japanese. So let me get back. So I'm just going to walk you through this. this is simply an introduction just to alert you to some of the basic ideas. At the beginning, I talked about this self-power and other power thing. Hopefully you'll see how self-power becomes other power. The jiriki becomes tariki in this, because he has this thing called a trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society. So one, he says, I have faith in myself. I recognize my own subjectivity and creativity and feel the worth of living in life. That's ikigai. In Western Europe and North America, the word ikigai is being used quite a lot at the moment. It's become very popular, this idea of the worth of living in life. Subjectivity and creativity can be translated or replaced with personality, divinity, and Buddha nature. At the end, you will see he adds another term here, subjectivity, creativity, and sociality. He feels that's important to add. But anyway, I have faith in myself. 2, I have faith in my neighbor. A neighbor is oneself as a neighbor. If I have faith in myself, I inevitably have faith in my neighbor. So although it's a self-power thing, Imaoka Sensei is saying, but I see the self in the other. So it immediately goes outwards again. It's not an inward turning solipsistic way of understanding the self. And then 3, I have faith in a cooperative society. Both oneself and a neighbor, while each possessing a unique personality, are not things that exist in isolation. Because of this uniqueness, a true interdependence, true solidarity, and true human love are established, and therein a cooperative society is realized. So you have faith in yourself. Because you have faith in yourself, you see you can have faith in the other. And because of that dynamic, he likes the word dynamic, you'll see at the end, a dynamic religion, that generates a society, a cooperative society. And 4, I have faith in the trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society. The self, neighbor, and cooperative society, while each having a unique personality, are entirely one. Therefore, there's no differentiation of precedence or superiority or inferiority between them. One always contains the other. Now, number 5 doesn't appear isn't in the 1965. The earlier version of this is exactly the same, except for number 5. This is because Imaoka Sensei is beginning to realize, like a lot of people were beginning to in the 60s and 70s, and indeed more so today, that the world isn't simply the human sphere. It extends. I mean, and so he explicitly wants to make that explicit in his statement of faith. So he adds, I have faith in the unity of life and nature, life which constitutes the trinity of self, neighbor, and cooperative society, further unites with all things in the universe. In later years, he starts talking about, he likes the English word cosmic to describe this cosmic cooperative society or universal cooperative society. Now, number 6, I have faith in the church. This is this kyokai. Remember what I said? I'll zoom in again, just so you can see the distinction. This is how it's often translated, written in modern Japanese, because that's an easily readable character. But I am pretty certain in his manuscript, he always used this version to talk. And again, for those of you who are not au fait with Japanese kanji, you can see that this is like a little house, the kai. That's the meeting house, and so you can see there is a little. So I'm a bit nervous about using the word church, or even though that's the common translation, because Imaoka Sensei, especially through this second use, wanted to indicate that the church, the kyokai, is more than a Christian church. It's expansive. It's bigger than a single religious tradition, but the limitations of language. So the church, the kyokai, is the prototype or archetype and driving force of the cooperative society, this community. I can only be myself by being a member of the church. Vital, the kyokai. 7. This begins to address your question, Peter. 7, he says, I have faith in a specific religion. In other words, I am a member of the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai. The Tokyo returning to one fellowship, unity fellowship, Tokyo Unitarian Church, however we choose to translate it. That's what he's a member of. However, a specific religion, including the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, neither monopolizes religious truth nor is the ultimate embodiment of it. So all local specific religions are necessary, but they're not absolute. And then he finishes this particular iteration of his principles of living by saying, I have faith in free religion, jiyu shukyo. While having faith in a specific religion, the endless pursuit and improvement towards universal and ultimate truth, notice that he talks about the endless pursuit. It's an endless pursuit and improvement. He's not one of those people that thinks you're going to get to that end. It's the dynamic direction he's referring to here. So the endless pursuit and improvement towards universal and ultimate truth is the core of religious life. Such a dynamic religion, there's that word, I'm sure he gets it, he's getting this from Bergson. Such a dynamic religion is called a free religion. So again, to briefly address Peter's point, free religion, which an individual can have, can be expressed in all kinds of ways. It can be expressed in a church that is explicitly trying to be a free religious community. But Imaoka Sensei is clear throughout that any extant religion, if it's lived in the kind of way he's just outlined in his principles of living, can be an expression of free religion. And therefore there are free religions existing everywhere. So he's trying to do that. So I'll leave that there. We come back to that in our conversation. In the notes, which you can download, the piece which follows, I put there because this was an interview for NHK, the Japanese television broadcaster, with Professor Wakimoto Tsuneya. I think that's how to pronounce it. Again, apologies. George, I believe, met Professor Wakimoto at some point. But he interviews Imaoka Sensei, and in this interview, Imaoka Sensei begins to draw out his own further understanding there. You see, it begins with a reading of these principles of living, and then Professor Wakimoto interviews him about that. So I'd really recommend giving it a read at some point. I'll just skip through it now because you know, it's not very long, but please do pay attention to that. I think it's an important document. So we now come, we're getting close to the end of my bit. Oh, there we go. This, remember, is the document that he typed in 1983-84 and was distributed at the Tokyo conference. So this is him writing in English. So I think we should pay attention to his choice of English words. Notice he uses belief in self. I think, whereas I chose to translate shinzuru as faith or trust in the earlier one, but he goes to belief. And you'll notice that it's the 8 points are now compressed to 5. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this an improvement? Is he trying to speak in a language that he thinks will land more successfully to Anglophone European, North American ears? I don't know. Be interested in your views. But this is what he presents. And notice also at the beginning that he puts in tentative as a version of which was in the other one. For Imaoka Sensei, all these statements must always be tentative. And I think he borrowed this from his encounter with Tenko Nishida, Tenko-san, whose own 5 prayers of Itoen begin with a little set of brackets which says this is a prayer for light provisional. This is, I think, an important idea in free religion, tentative, provisional. So I'll just read these. 1984. 1. I believe in self, awaken to the autonomy, sociality, there's that added word, awaken to the autonomy, sociality, and creativity within me, I find my daily life worth living, ikigai. Autonomy, sociality, and creativity may be called personality, divinity, and Buddhahood. 2, I believe in others. Because of my belief in self, I cannot help but believe in others who have their own selves as neighbours. 3, I believe in community. Both myself and other selves are unique, but not absolutely distinct from each other. Hence, solidarity, fellowship, and community will be realized. 4, I believe in the cosmic community. There's that word cosmic, which he began to love in English. He would sometimes call himself or talk about his project, his personal project, as becoming a cosmic man, a sort of, the most expansive human being possible. 4, I believe in the cosmic community. Not only self, others, and community, but all nature, in addition, are one and constitute the cosmic community. 5, I believe in the church. So he uses the word church in English. The church epitomizes the cosmic community, and I will be a cosmic man, there you are, by joining the church. So that's a really important point again to make, that for Imaoka Sensei, there's no way you can be this expansive, free religious person just on your own. It makes no sense to him. Self, others, community. Communities, others, self. Others, self, community. They're always doing that. And you can't be a self, a cosmic man, human being, cosmic self, without being in that network of belonging. And I'm coming right to the very end now, and then I'll stop and invite conversation. What we have here, just to get close to Imaoka Sensei himself, are his own handwritten notes to that statement. They were appended to it, 1983, you can see January the 1st, 1983. He wrote these and attached it to the statement of faith which he gave out the following year. So I'll simply read them again. 1, free religion is not a ready-made religion and has not a creed nor a dogma except a tentative statement. 2, particular religion is free religion. Back to your point, Peter, I think. Particular religion is free religion if it does not insist on a monopoly of truth and applies itself diligently to seek after truth in others too. 3, free religion is neither a new religion that unifies all particular religions, nor a new religion that competes with particular religions, but is within particular religions as their essence. That word essence is always a tricky one, those of you involved in philosophy and things. Also notice he chooses to cross out immanent. And I think that might be significant, but I'm not sure about that yet. 4, because I and others are not quite independent of each other and form a community, free religion is both individual and community religion. 5, because free religion is nothing but the realization of the pure and genuine human nature, consisting of autonomy, creativity, and sociality, all human activities, i.e. politics, economy, education, art, labour, and even domestic affairs, are also free religion, as much as they are also realization of the same fundamental human nature. There is no fundamental distinction between the sacred and the secular. So, again, I want to say that this speaks, I think, to your point, Peter, that free religions in Imaoka Sensei's mind doesn't just include those things that we would often call religions. If a version of politics or domestic work or education is expressed with the spirit of free religion, it can be itself a free religion. And indeed, at Seisoku Academy, they didn't teach a religion class. Imaoka Sensei's attitude was always, if you taught maths, history, so on and so forth, with the right spirit, the spirit of free religion would emerge. So that's how they understood free religion. You could teach free religion through maths. And if you want later on, I've got a wonderful story that he tells about how maths can, a mathematical encounter can reveal an aspect of free religion, but you can ask me that later. And then lastly, and with this I will finish, 6, free religion is more than the cooperation of religions and the world peace movement. So there he was, pushing again to say it's much more, we can do much more with this concept. I think that's enough from me. I'll stop sharing the screen.
Okay.
I'll unspotlight myself.
Okay.
And now we have an hour. I mean, we have an hour. Run freely. Critique as well. If you think something I've said is plain wrong or rubbish, I'm quite happy to hear that too. So who fancies going?
If I may, perhaps. I'm sorry, my webcam is no longer working. I'm Luke. So I'm intrigued by the ability of Shinichiro Imaoka to integrate so many different sources of both knowledge and spirituality in his life and in his thought. And I always am fascinated by when two very different worlds meet in someone, a person. And so you mentioned that he was inspired by, or he found parallels to his own understanding of Shinto in Bergson and in the force of life that Bergson spoke of. But also, I think he was quite fascinated by Emerson, and so the transcendentalist movement that also shaped the American Unitarian movement to a large degree, it has also been important to him, I think. Would you say that it was one of his sources? And if you were to, do you think that what he did could be described as a syncretic or approach to Western and Eastern thought?
Yes, and so let's take that in order. He did combine these things, and in fact, I should share this little image because I can hang my answer on it. This was a piece of calligraphy that was done for George by Imaoka Sensei. You can see his signature here, Imaoka Shin'ichiro, and his seals. And then we have, in the University of Life, there is no graduation. And this was one of his watchwords. And at the very end of the book of essays, that's flagged up by the by one of the editors as something that everybody in Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai knew. So it's and for him, it's not that. So remember, he began in a Jodo Shinshu family, converted to Anglican Christianity, became a congregational minister, then engaged with the Unitarians, then had this profound experience with actually Buddhism first through Anisaki Masaharu, who reintroduced him to the positive aspects of Buddhism. Imaoka Sensei had rejected his Jodo Shinshu upbringing as a very young man because he objected to being taught religion by rote. He always had that sense of needing to understand what was going on. So he couldn't engage with it. So these were these choices he made. But by the time he meets Anisaki Masaharu, who famously says it's because I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, because I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist, Imaoka Sensei began to re-engage with his Buddhist inheritance. He loved Shinran. He's often talking about Shinran's 18th vow to save all beings. So Shinran comes back into the picture. But then he encounters J.W.T. Mason, Joseph Warren Teets Mason, and encounters Shinto and begins to see richness in Shinto in the connection with Bergson, as you've right said, the force of life, the élan vital. And then he moves on to his whole interfaith work, the encounter with Indian religions. George can maybe speak about that. He was very interested in, like many people of that generation, Vivekananda, but also Sri Ramakrishna and Raja Rammohan Roy, all of those very interesting Hindu characters. But the reason I'm going through this list is he didn't see himself specifically being, well, I was a Jodo Shinshu, now I'm a Christian, now I'm this, now I'm this. He never felt that these were graduations. These were incorporations into this larger life, into becoming a cosmic man, a cosmic human. And so it's tempting to use the language of syncretism to say he was mashing them together, but it wasn't a pick and mix thing. It's not that kind of syncretic thing. It's syncretic in the way any religion is. I think all religions are syncretic in that they're always drawing insights into themselves and presenting them in a different way. But you're right, Luke. He was often described negatively as, oh, he's simply a syncretist. We don't need to take him seriously because he's not one thing or another. So that was a criticism, but my reading of it is syncretic, but every religion is syncretic. And Imaoka Sensei was syncretic in an integrative way. Again, George might be able to speak about this intricative, can never pronounce that word, spirituality. And lastly, the Emerson thing. He loved Emerson, but towards the end of his life, there's one of the essays in the book where he's talking about reconnecting with Emerson because he finds Emerson phenomenally difficult to understand. He'd only read sort of pamphlets and things, but he orders from a friend a book of Emerson. So he's reading Emerson again in his hundreds. But I think it's important when people talk about, and he was, as I say, influenced by him, but it was more in the spirit of Emerson. Because whatever else Imaoka Sensei is, he's not a phenomenally, I mean, he's a hugely gifted, remarkable human being, but he's not an astonishing writer like Emerson. Emerson's a real stylist. Imaoka Sensei is not a stylist in that sense. But the spirit of Emerson of being open and constantly moving forward and being open to the world, that's where you and not only open, but moving beyond denominational boundaries. Remember, Emerson's move was from a kind of very rigid form of Unitarianism, the Boston Unitarianism, the Boston Brahmins, to this ever more expansive way of being religious in a free and liberative way. I think that's what that's what Shinichiro Imaoka takes from Emerson and then lives that Emersonian spirit through his entire life. I'll stop there. I hope that explains or says something useful. Yeah, George, go for it.
Well, as a filler, I'd like to compliment you on the great job that you've done. I was very emotionally affected by the two pieces that you showed, the one of the about the University of Life, and also the 1983 handwritten principles that he wrote for me, and it was one of the times that he wrote something and handed it to me, and I was the one that when he was wondering about whether he really remembered Emerson correctly, uh, I brought him the entire set of Emerson's collected works. And the next year when I came, he said, "Well, I really don't understand this man." He had changed so much and expanded so much in his understanding of the essence of religion. And I'm kind of tempted always in my mind to want to use static dyads, either right or wrong, true or false, genuine or false. And it's the essence of religion. But for me, I've run into so much false religion in my life that I want to, have these dichotomies that he didn't have, because he found in each of the traditions something that was there beyond the organized, ordinary, conservative or liberal religion that was so much needed to go beyond. And you can see why Andrew does such a wonderful job, and I cannot express much about him. One other thing that it's so late here already. It's already 2 hours past my bedtime, so I I'll think of it in a minute and maybe add it later.
Well, thanks for coming, George. You're at the end of your day. I'm at the beginning. It's too early for me still. Jazz musician, you see, we don't get up in the morning.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for your answer and just say that when I used the word syncretic, I did not mean it as a derogatory term, just, descriptive, but your answer was very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, but I think it's that and I certainly didn't hear that, Luke. I can see, Peter, you've got your hand up. I'll grab it. But I think it's important to remember that often when we're in this world of trying to do religious dialogue between different traditions and exploring free religion, jiyu, shukyo, I have to say my preference is if I can I try and persuade my own congregation, and I would try and persuade English speakers not to translate jiyu shukyo and actually learn jiyu shukyo as a term. We've learnt lots of other Japanese terms, whether it's or terms from Buddhism. Dharma would be a good example, because jiyu shukyo keeps in play this complex meaning of a creative, inquiring, free, and liberative religion. But anyway, that's But in this interfaith world, Luke, it's so often when I'm talking with people, that word will be thrown at you to say, oh well, it can be dismissed because it's syncretic. It isn't anything. And in fact, here in the United Kingdom, Derek Macaulay may from the UK may know some of these things. Here in Cambridge, we tried to change our objects to include that we are a congregation which learns from the liberal Christian heritage, humanism, Buddhism, so on and so on and so forth. It's a free religious attitude. And our own United Kingdom Charity Commissioners wrote back and said, oh, you're confusing there's a lack of clarity about what kind of religion you are. And we just said, we're completely clear what kind of religion we are. We're a free religion, and it takes that. But our officials just said, you can't have that because it's unclear. It makes everything unclear, and therefore we're not having it. So the word syncretic can be weaponized, as we know. So thanks, Luke.
Yeah, thank you.
And Peter, up next.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much also for your answers to my question, Andrew. Next question. How does free religion relate to esoteric movements in the West?
Yeah.
As I say, of course, in the West, because I think in the East, of course, it's much more embodied into Hinduism and Buddhism and so on. But of course, for instance, Theosophy also claims to be the essence of all world religions. So do they then also fit in the concept of free religion?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So the whole kind of the realm of these esoterics, perhaps with Imaoka Shin'ichiro to answer that, is probably best to go through the language of mysticism first. When he was studying religions with Anasaki Masaharu, he wrote, it's one of the essays that's been translated, so it's fascinating, a long essay on mysticism. European mysticism. He's deeply embedded in it. He knows that tradition. And so Imaoka Sensei is completely open to a realm of human experience that is not simply and only evidence-based. He understands that, but he's one of those people that is always wanting to make sure there's an adequate balance between those two. So he will not go down, he would never go down the route of simply saying, oh, well, I've simply had a mystical experience, or I've got some esoteric insight, that if it doesn't relate and connect directly with the natural sciences, with the evidence of conversation and so on and so forth, he's so any esoteric tradition that doesn't pay attention to this other side and recognizes that it hasn't got access to the final truth and so on and so forth, no, that's not a free religion. Can you imagine an esoteric religion that does that? Then yeah, that could be a free religion. But I think many of us will have seen that unfortunately many of those esoteric type religions depend upon the claimed insight of a single visionary, and then you don't get the checks and balances that Imaoka Sensei wants between self, other, and community. Also, remember, Imaoka's understanding of community is to be as flat as possible. Interesting dilemma and problem for free religion. I'll leave it on we can run with it if you like. One of the failure, because Imaoka Sensei's project failed in Japan. A couple of years after he died, the Tokyo Kitsukyokai had gone. And that was partly because even though he's always pushing against charismatic characters, and he did that remarkably, he didn't, through his structures of his Tokyo Kitsukyokai or how they formed themselves, without a character holding it together at the center, it dissolved. So one of the problems free religion has got to do is find a way of getting is having a I'm starting to use the language of a center of gravity. It's a dynamic center of gravity. So the esoteric, the mystical is part of Imaoka Sensei's makeup, but no, it's this embedded quality, and the fact that it's not going to say, well, you know what, we've got the final answer, and that's of course his criticism of any extant religion. If it's presenting itself as, well, we have the truth, then that's not a free religion. But as we know, many of the extant religions, from Christianity, Judaism, Islam, so on and so forth, they can all be lived by people with a free religious spirit. And then, actually, I will add one point. You will have noticed in that the written statement at the end, when he talks about religion not being free religion isn't a ready-made religion. He likes that image of ready-made. He uses the image of ready-made clothes and tailored clothes. His point is, it's not that ready-made clothes, tailored clothes are horrible. I have nothing, I'm wearing nothing that isn't ready-made. It's bought the church. I haven't got any tailored clothing on me at all. I happen to fortunately have a body shape that means they fit me, they work. So Imaoka Sensei is very clear about saying, well, if you encounter a ready-made religion and it fits and it works and allows you to be a free religious person, then live it. But for him, he always recognized there were a few of us in the religious sphere, but when we put on these religious clothing, it's, oh, that's a bit tight under the arms. I want to move that. Oh, no, I can, and you can go through the process of creating something that's more bespoke. So that's one of the ways we can understand how we can be within existing religions, religious or spiritual traditions, and that's okay if they live with the right spirit. Or for those of us who struggle a bit with that, we can create free religious communities like the Tokyo Kyotsu Kyokai. So that's that. I got two questions. I think it was Esther first and then Marie. So please jump in, Esther, and then Marie.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
When you gave the 8 or 6, no, or 7, I believe, I would ask
8,
you, yeah. When you say, for instance, I take 2 examples, I believe in the church, or I believe in the, I think universe was also one of them. I ask you, would you talk of self-reflection or of a relationship?
No, that's a very good question, because the I believe, I have faith in. Actually, I will ask. I've got your question in my head. I'm just going to quickly ask Michinori and Yuji. I'll put up the Japanese word again. You don't have to answer. Oh, whoops, sorry. I'm sharing the wrong document. Stop share. Let's find the right document. There we go. And go back to right. Do either of you, Yuji or Michinori, want to say anything about this word here? Is there anything you could help us with? Shinzuru, I think it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
Shinjiru, yes,
Shinjuru, okay,
pronunciation
thank
is
you.
right. It means the believing, what even trusting is
Yeah.
the verb. It's not the noun, it's the action, believing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
I don't know,
Michinori?
Maruta-san.
Okay,
Maybe Maruta-san has.
thank you. I am a Buddhist, so in Buddhist point of view, faith means conviction, not blind faith or forced faith, but conviction.
Right.
So I think that in that sense, Shinzuru is, I understand that, particularly Imaoka Sensei's notion of Shinzuru. I think he meant conviction.
Right. That's, yeah, I think that's right. This is the difficulty of, you know, my Japanese is not quite non-existent now, but it's not good. Trying to tease out these nuances. So back to your question, it's about faith. We're back at this language of dynamic. So it's whenever it's having talking about I believe in, remember the self, the I believe in, I have faith, I have conviction is wrapped up in the who I am that has this faith and this conviction is someone who's embedded and interconnected with the other and the community. So it's a dynamic thing, and it's both individual and collective. He's trying to draw that out. And I do want to go back to just to finish that bit about, make the point again that I see reading his work, he's always trying to balance that thing he gets from Jodo Shinshu tradition of mistrusting Jiriki and wanting to trust Tariki, so self-power practices, other power practices. So he wants practices that are other power practices, having faith in this bigger something, which come through his own practices. He's trying to keep them together in this jiyu. Maruta Sensei, or does that make some sense in your context?
Yes and no. That means I would like just a little bit continue. I don't know whether we have enough time. It doesn't matter if we don't have. Of course, having a Christian background, I wondered, wouldn't be an 8 point saying, I have faith in God, for instance.
Okay.
And this, of course, for Buddhists is not an issue. So I would like to know, is it a self-reflection, I have faith, I believe, or is it a relationship? If it's a relationship, it would get close to having a relation to God, for instance.
Yep. No, it's a great point, because although in his statements of faith, there is no mention of God, he talks about Buddha nature. So technically speaking, on the surface, they are non-theistic. They could be. But in truth, I think what's going on here is that which humans have felt could be called the divine and the sacred, and which at times has been given the name God, or indeed kami. Remember, because kami is the word he's often using in the Japanese to translate God, and kami is a complex in how it's understood within Japanese culture, often very rooted in Shinto practice, but not exclusively. That sense of the divine and sacred had become his whole life, and his whole life is relationship. So whatever God is and the encounter with God is relational. It's all about relations. It's when he says he has faith in these things, it's not in a fixed object. It's faith in a process, the élan vital, in the living quality of it. So for him, the divine and the sacred didn't exist in an otherworldly realm or in abstract absolutes, but only in those images, symbols, and practical examples that evoked and gestured towards creative freedom and liberation of an evolving humanity. This striving together to become a unity, kiitsu, he loves that word, in its diversity, but also recognizing that this striving and this freedom can only take place in a community, a kyokai of relations. So it's all relation, it's all movement, and that whole movement, I don't want to put words in his mouth because he didn't actually say this, but it's that whole movement, this whole movement of life that is, scare quotes, God. kami, the divine, the sacred. But that's my interpretation. So, after having read a lot of Imaoka Sensei, I've got you, Marie. I don't want to, but can I just ask
Thank you.
Maruta Sensei's that balance between Tariki and Jiriki, does that make sense to you, him trying to balance self-power and other power?
Very much so. Because
Okay.
I think that the Jiriki and the Tariki is not the idea of the Buddha himself.
Yeah.
No. That's the notion coined by the later disciples of the Buddha. Now,
Yeah.
I think Buddha didn't refer to anything about Jiriki and Tariki. So it's okay to balancing or focusing on Tariki or only focusing on Jiriki. That's no problem at all. The problem is the ultimate goal is liberation.
Right.
Ultimate goal is liberation. So Tariki, if Tariki is liberation, a free religion, it's okay. If Jiriki is free religion, it's okay to me, no problem.
Right. Now that's really helpful, because I think what Imaoka Sensei is trying to do is make that clear in his own context. So he's always playing. Thank you. That's and just again, sorry, Marie, just because it's the only opportunity I'll ever get. Jiyu, does that make sense to you as well? Yuji, sorry. Does that make sense to you as well? Only chance I get.
I just listened to, I'm learning from all of you, and Michinori-san, Marta-san, what he said is I have learned a lot from him about the Buddhism. So Tariki Hongan and the Jiriki Hongan, yes.
Okay.
I agree with the Marta-san so much. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That's good. Thank you. Oh, George, can it hold or not?
Or just a word. Yuji really gave a clue to Imaoka's thought. Faith should be translated trust.
Yeah.
And trust is experiential.
Yeah.
And everything that he is talking about is not a belief system. It is an experiential system.
Yeah.
And you are free to experience and come to perspectives of freedom and liberation. That was a footnote.
No, that's really helpful. Hence his valuing of meditation. Sorry, Marie, my deep apologies. That's it. We should be able to hear you. Yeah.
Yes. Well, no apologies. It's all very interesting. I have a question about the word religion, because religion in secular Holland is a difficult word.
Yeah.
A lot of people calling themselves spiritual, but not religious.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is the concept of religion, is it essential to have a community? Because there are also many spiritual groups, not only in Holland, but for instance, the Diamond Approach from Almaas, Ken Wilber, they're all talking about cosmic consciousness. But, well, they also have a community, but they all have one teacher. And that's maybe the difference. You talked about the egalitarian structure of the religion, but if I would say here in Holland free religion, then they say, well, interesting that it's free, but the word religion is already a sort of whole.
No, that's a brilliant question, and unfortunately, I have an answer.
Oh.
Well, I say unfortunately in the sense because I think it's partly a joke, but partly not a joke. One needs to be careful when anyone says, "Oh, Gudrun, bye. Lovely to have you with us." Sorry, I've just seen that pop up. Thank you for coming. But I'm also suspicious of people who come up with immediate ready answers like I've just done. I have an answer to that. Right? So I do think I have a useful response, but two clear answers can worry me. With that caveat, I'll say this. The reason so in here in Cambridge, we had a long, and it's still going on to some extent, about whether we should, so remember my long translation of jiyu shukyo is a creative, that's the dynamic, inquiring, free and liberative, okay, that bit everyone's happy with. It's a bit long-winded, but that's what it means. Do we use religion or spirituality? And lots of people said, oh, no, we want to create a creative, inquiring, free and liberative spirituality. We don't want religion. And a few people wanted the other. Now, I generally err towards the idea of spirituality in general conversation, but I want to make a case for keeping the English word religion. Again, you can make the etymology is going to be the same in Dutch. The Dutch word is
religie. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's exactly the same word. The etymology is the same. There are many possible etymologies of religion, where the word came from. It could be relegere, rereading. And I think that's an important word to keep in place, because whatever else Imaoka Shin'ichiro's religion and spirituality showed was he was always prepared to reread, go over the text again and see the new thing. So if the etymology is free rereading, religio, yeah, I'll have that. But the most common etymology, there are others, I won't go on doing it, but these are that's one very common one. The second one is like ligature, the binding, the tying together. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people in free and liberal religion or spirituality don't like, because they perceive binding as being a negative, unfree thing. Now, this is why I insisted, it might seem like a totally minor point until now, so I thank you, Marie, for raising it. This is why I want to hyphenate in English free religion. So we haven't got an adjective, free, and a noun, religion. We have this compound noun, free religion, which holds together this idea. That which frees us is that which holds us together, religio, is that which frees us. That's what Imaoka Sensei is asking for. He's looking for that binding of community that is a binding that frees us to new insights. Because whatever else we need in this liberal, free, religious, spiritual world is a sense of being together, bound together in some freeing way. That's what the IARF is about. That's what liberal religions are about. What binds us across our different religious and cultural traditions, keeps us as a religio, not in a dogmatic way, but holds us together in ways that continue to free us, that it's liberative. So that's why I want to hyphenate and keep in English the possibility of free religion. But your point, Marie, is still well made, because the moment you use the word, people will go, ooh. So we have to go through this dance every time. But there's nothing wrong with going through a dance every time. It's quite fun. I don't know if that answers. Yeah.
So if I may, I don't know if anyone has raised their hands. I don't think so. The problem with religion is how you understand it, and of course the problem of definitions is always the starting point of any discussion, right? And I never really understood why so many people have a problem with it when you look at the etymology. And religare is to bind, but we can interpret it in a relational sense, a dialogical sense. And this brings me to an observation that, well, my thinking is usually associative. So I tend to see connections between different philosophies and different sources of inspiration. And when I listened to you, and before when I was reading the materials and George's book, what struck me that there are a lot of similarities between Imaoka's thought and certain philosophies that have developed in Europe in the Christian context. For example, existentialism, not not in the manner of Sartre, but more Kierkegaard and the personalist existentialism. And what I can also see is the tension and the honest and attempt that Imaoka makes to reconcile the personal and individual with the collective. And I think the answer that he gives, or maybe it's not the final answer, he probably wouldn't say so himself, but his thoughts are very interesting because they are not perfectly copying the, let me call it the Eastern way of thinking about the self, which is basically that the self is kind of delusion that is in itself a form of slavery, bondage, something that one has to liberate themselves from, because it's suffering, it's attachment, and so on. In the West, the concept of self or selbst, or it's much more positive, and there is a similarity because, of course, you will be familiar with the philosophy of dialogue, as we call it. So Levinas, for example, the Jewish philosophers, they're called dialogue philosophers, like Buber, Rosenzweig, Levinas, where the emphasis is on a relationship where the self is actualized in a relationship with the other, but doesn't disappear. It is still the point of departure. And I couldn't help but notice that Imaoka, in his principles, he starts from the self. So even though you said there is no hierarchy, that it's all together, it's not alienated, the self is not alienated from anything else, but he still begins from it, so it's important to him. And so I see very, very interesting, fascinating ways in which this could lead to could be compared to and could just be an inspiration taken in conjunction with those, let's say, European Western traditions of a dialogical view of relationship and of becoming together. So I become myself, I become more human through my interaction with other humans, but I don't disappear in the collective, and I don't disappear in a spiritual oneness totally. If I understand it correctly, what he is saying, of course.
Yeah, no, that's massively helpful and insightful. Thank you. I think you're absolutely right in your outline there. I think what I would add to it is, at least my understanding of Buddhist philosophy, and again, we can ask Maruta Sensei to comment on this later. I mean, my real knowledge of Buddhism is through my active involvement in the Jodo Shinshu Higashi Honganji community, which I'm connected with. It's not that within many Buddhist thinking, so please correct me, remember, come back and tell me, it's not that there is no such thing as the self, it is no such thing as the permanent self. So there are these moments when, self, and that's where we individuals come into focus. So you start there, but it's through a proper understanding of there being no permanent self that one says, oh, I belong, I'm in movement, I belong to everything else. So I think that's what Imaoka Sensei is trying to do with that ordering, is to say, we start there. It's not an illusion, but it's an illusion if you absolutize the self. The self makes sense if it can see it's in the other, in the community, and in the cosmic community. That's fine, because that's where we have to start, but we can't end there. So, yeah, I think your points are spot on. Maruta Sensei?
I'm not sensei.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway,
My apologies.
James, and you recaps beautifully the notion of self. I think I admire your explanation. Thank you very much. Maybe we talk about this because enormous theme.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future. Yeah, it's very interesting to talk
Thank you.
about.
Well, another thing I could add then, because it is connected with it, it's clearly very important to Imaoka Sensei's way of trying to understand the world, is that there is no independent causation. Everything is dependent upon everything else all the time. So that's really key. But it is practical. We, Luke, in our own community in Cambridge, trying to articulate our own version of this, had a long conversation about the need to start with the self, because we haven't got anywhere else to start, but to start with a self that makes it clear that's not where we end, that that what the self is, oh yeah, it's not just inwards, it's expansive. So thanks.
Yes, exactly. That's very, very well said. I would, my personal view would be that I could say, following some of those schools of thought, let's say that I mentioned, that the self can be alienated, and that's probably what you say when it's absolutized. So it's separated from the others. And nature, of course, also, and the quest that we have ahead of us is, of course, to reach out, and so thank you.
I've used this image before. It was an accident of having a conversation with another group of people about Imaoka Sensei's thing is that what's fascinating about his looks like, put scare quotes around it, his inward movement to the self. I have faith in myself. Seems to be doing that, but the moment the direction is this for a moment, but then it immediately comes out the other side and everywhere else, and encounters the other. Oh, there's me too. So his inward move is simultaneously a move outwards.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Just one image came to my mind. There is this Christian doctrine of the Trinity, which we're, of course, very familiar with.
Yeah.
Unitarianism basically was born as an opposition to it. For various reasons, and of course, as a doctrine, it's awful, and we all agree that dogmas are no. But the thought behind it is very interesting because it tells a story of how a person is actualized as a person in relationship with other persons in community of, in this case, not even two, but three persons. So it's receiving, it's giving, and in this dynamic relationship, their own identities established. So
no, again, I think you're spot on there, and I think one of the revolution, if indeed revolutionary change, always a difficult word, but Imaoka Sensei is doing from within. Clearly, he's coming out of a Unitarian tradition, is to push against the old classical monotheistic idea of what Unitarianism, that the one was out there and then the one did things to us.
Yes.
Yeah. Imaoka's Unitarianism is dynamic and Trinitarian, and I would, for those of you who are connected with the Unitarian tradition here, and I do say this publicly, is that that's one of the problems of particularly of early Unitarian thought, right up into the Enlightenment form, is its understanding of unity is too static and too mono, and we need these kind of relational understandings. In terms, the Trinity does offer that in terms of metaphor, but for me, in the Unitarian tradition, or coming out of it, Imaoka Sensei's relational understanding is a beautiful expression of what we're talking about. So, thanks. Any other folk, do chip in. It's be lovely to hear from others. I mean, you don't have to. This is about free religion, of course. Derek, you've
Andrew,
unmuted.
yes.
Hey, wonderful. Nice to see you.
I am here. I was having breakfast. Didn't. I suppose my question would be the notion that economics, politics is intrinsically linked to being a free religious person. But where do you draw the boundaries of when you start getting involved in political, economic, social activities? Humanists have this problem as well.
Yeah.
The Humanist Association in Britain takes a very strong lines on certain political issues. And I often think, well, all of their members can't really agree on whether taxes should be increased or decreased. Is that a free religious question?
Yeah, no, it is a free religious question. There aren't any boundaries. Imaoka's quite clear about that. Anything can be free religion if it follows those things. So there are no boundaries. It's always a question of discerning within any particular activity whether it is indeed an expression of this jiyu shukyo, this creative, free and inquiring, liberative spirituality. We'll call it spirituality in this context. So if your politics and your economics doesn't do that, I think you would say, well, it doesn't fit the bill. But I can give you. I'm trying to, if I can find it. I can't remember the names. Some of you may remember. I can remember the general story. But in one of Imaoka's sensei's essays in this book, so bear in mind, we hope to publish these newly translated essays with any help we can get. Some of them are up on my blog, but let me just find my blog so you know what I'm talking about. This is my blog. Can you all see this page?
Yes.
So it's andrewjbrownblogspot.com, but if you caute, I've borrowed that from Spinoza, it means take care, caution. But right at the top is this thing called, it says Jiyu Shukyo, a creative free religion. If you click on that, you come to this page, and this is the book that George and I put together a while ago now, back in 2022, which were previously translated essays of Imaoka's writing, and you can find a link here. There's George's book. Please read George's book if you've got the time, Cosmic Sage. That's available either in hard copy or... But here, selected writings on free religion and other subjects. You click on that, you'll be able to find the story I'm about to tell you. He tells a story about two important Japanese businessmen, Meiji businessmen, one who had a failure and one who was the key steamship owner of the time. And the sort of failed businessman was asking this great shipping magnate to borrow some money. And he sort of said, well, you know, why borrow from me? You know, I'm trying to help you become a great business person. And then he goes through this whole process of liberating this other person to be more successful without relying on themselves. And Imaoka Sensei uses this as an example of this apparently wealthy magnate, instead of enslaving someone by, you know, making them get in debt and so on and so forth, but gives them a way of actually liberating themselves as an individual in their own cause. And he points to that as an example of a business person being a way of expressing free religion in the world. And there are other examples. So when I say there are no boundaries, I don't mean anything goes. It simply means in every sphere of human. Well, we can go back to that point. Remember, it's the. Let's reread it. Oh, of course, I've got all this digital technology. What am I doing? Looking up. Here we go. Share. Yeah, here we are. So let's go back to his written notes, because that's the one. Remember, because I think this is the number 5. Because free religion is nothing but the realization of the pure and genuine human nature, consisting of autonomy, creativity, and sociality. All human activities, and he gives the list, are also free religion, as much as they are also realization of the same fundamental human nature. That's, I think, the key thing. That's where you're making a discernment in the public space. Are you expressing that in your business, your domestic? No, then it's not free religion. What he wants to break down is the artificial boundaries between those things to reveal this sort of something that's shared. George, I hope that helps, Derek. I don't know if that's any.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I have to go now. I've got a call at 10 o'clock.
Okay, Derek,
in UK time.
George, you and me need to liaise.
I will be.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lovely having you. Thank you. George.
I was going to pick up what Derek had asked about the boundaries. Imaoka had such a very high standard for becoming a human being. He even said that he wasn't one yet. And that's a clue to what he meant by you could realize becoming a human being in any activity. And I think that one of the areas that might give an insight would be from a very Protestant activity of ministering, that every human being might minister to the existential needs of someone else. And maybe that illustration, it didn't speak to me very much, of the magnate not loaning any money to the man that was desperate. But somehow or other, it worked out in the end that the man realized his own independence and got out and worked really hard and became a human being. Now, for me, that was a little bit of a stretch, but the essence of that story was how marvelous it would be for us animals who are aggressive, deceitful, down the list. And Imaoka didn't see it that way. He saw every one of our potential to become a human being. Oh my, he was such a bad teacher, or I was such a bad student. 6 years, and I really couldn't get it. And even when he wrote out some of his definitions of being a human or a free religion, it still didn't all fit together. And it is beginning to, as you and Maruta-san begin to pull these teachings together, it's beautiful. I'm really very much a student. Thank you so much.
Maybe also it's like a free religious teacher. What they want to accomplish is to make you think and want to make you decide for yourself. And
he wouldn't tell you any answer. You had to come to the experiences yourself. It was experiential. It was not about learning the answers.
Yeah, that's why it strikes me so much, the parallel with existentialism, right? Because of the emphasis on living through something.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's something distinctive about Imaoka Shinichiro's existentialism, which is that this is not an absolute thing I'm about to say, but whereas often in the European and to some extent the North American context, is the existentialist bit can land very heavily on the angst side of it. And that's real, you know, we need to take that into account. That's something you mustn't avoid. And goodness knows Imaoka Shin'ichiro had to deal with a lot of that, both in terms of growing up in the era that he did, and then there was the great earthquake of 1922, and then the difficulties in the run-up to the Pacific War, and then afterwards loads of stuff. He had to deal with all of that. But what's remarkable is in his presentation of the existential search, I think he offers the reader a good, gentle, positive way in that that I think is admirable, and I value that. When I read Imaoka Sensei, generally I smile. When I read Kierkegaard, I learn a hell of a lot. I sort of, you get both in both. But I do like the way the way Imaoka Shinichiro presented things. I'm alert to the fact that we're coming up to the last 2 minutes. I've shared in the chat my email. Should anyone wish to be in touch, please do so. If you want to be involved in the translation project more or have any personal questions, do that. You could also pass it through Luke, I'm sure, through the IARF. But I want to remind you that in a month's time, we've got the second one of these. And what we're going to do in the second one is look at how Imaoka Shinichiro played out these principles in his own community, the Tokyo Kietsu Kyokai, both the good things and the things that worked and the things that seemingly failed. I can bring to the conversation some of the things that we've been doing within the Cambridge community to try and do something of our own that's in that spirit. And it will be wonderful if during this coming month, if these ideas land, that some of you could think about, how am I playing that out in my own communities or in my own individual life? Because that's the next move that I think we need to do, and that's what we'll do in the next one. And Luke, are you still there?
Oh, yes, of course.
There's another set of texts. This is for everybody else for the second session. And if I could ask you, Luke, if I send those to you, if you could pop those up as session materials.
Of course. That's something I wanted to discuss with you a bit, because I would like to create a course on our platform, e-learning platform, with this recording and with all the materials that we can get.
Right.
I suppose maybe George would be willing to share the Cosmic Sage, because he once did with the Congress participants. So we could collect materials, readers as well. I will make a draft and I will show it to you, and I'll show you how you can edit it. And this way, also, after the second session concludes, people can still go back and profit from this course.
Perfect. So just to remind all of you, I'll just find the IARF website again, and for my own benefit, as much as yours, if I do IARF, oh no, hang on, I've got it here. There we are. So we go to the Free Religion Institute. Oh, there's Luke. And then down the bottom. So the next one, which will be a continuer, hopefully you'll come and can bring stuff there. It's Wednesday 26th. The times are there. And Luke will do something magical on the website, but there'll be a version of that button where you can download the texts for the second. I can share them here now. You can download them immediately if you like. That's easily done. I'll put them in the chat now.
Thank you.
But are there any final 1 minute question? Anything anyone wants to add immediately that cannot wait?
Hi. Fabulous talk, Andrew. I really appreciate it, and I've been following it all along. And I just want to as Marie-Louise was pointing out, here in the Netherlands, many people are saying I'm spiritual but not religious. So I understand that whole concept. And I come from a pagan background, and what I've seen in the last 40 odd years is this gradual acceptance also of what I probably call indigenous wisdom, reverence for the land. There is a growing, especially with all the environmental problems we're having to face, that many people are finding also that it's important to be able to be true to yourself. So this is what resonates with free religion, of course, this very, very, very first thing, belief in yourself. And sometimes I say it's very, very much like an antinomian way of looking at it. And some people are actually sort of saying, pagans are antinomian, and again, using these words which are sometimes not really well understood. So I always say, well, perhaps it's better to talk about a philosophical approach. I've just put it in the chat. I'm seeing as well that if we talk about, for example, Wicca, which is my background, if we talk about the philosophy of Wicca or the philosophy of whatever, people are much more open to saying, "Oh, right, I've never thought of it from that perspective."
I think
Even Gandhian philosophy, and then you don't tend to get into the political problems of whether somebody was politically correct or not. So that's something which may be helpful for you as well to say, if we look at it from a philosophical point of view, then people are more eager to engage. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
That's my experience so far, anyway.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's, again, this is what's magical about Imaoka Shin'ichiro. It offers both those, that there's this philosophical way in, but there's also this experiential way. Without the experiential, it doesn't come alive. But thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do the timekeeping thing. I would love to go on talking for hours and hours and hours but I know George wants to fall asleep. I have shared before logging off, if you're there, in the chat, you can download, you should see the PDF of the texts. If you click on that, you can download it. But so that's for the next session. Yeah. The first texts are already up on the website. So download that. Luke will do his magic. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, I just wanted, maybe if I can have 1 minute, I would